And we are live. Welcome to Creative Right Now Podcast, a special interview series where I chat with published authors, industry professionals, and other writers to bring you value and help you really elevate your craft and get your writing to the next level. I'm your host, Kauffman, and today we have an absolutely exciting show for you. But before we get into that, just a couple of housekeeping. So if you're watching this on the replay, I actually got you covered. You can actually skip ahead to the points in the video that bring you the most value because I'll be adding time codes at the end of the stream. All right, beautiful. Marta, welcome to the stream. And we got John Silent. It's great to see you, my friend. Welcome, welcome. And IR Dave, welcome to the chat. Welcome, my friends. So, as y'all know, every day I've been doing different formats. So with the Monday through Friday, it's more of our casual writers group, whereas Saturdays tends to be more of the critique show. With our Sunday podcast, I try to keep this, and try to make it a little bit more professional. Now, with this format, you're actually encouraged to ask questions throughout. I'll pull some questions up during the podcast itself, and then we'll do some questions for the end. All right. And in terms of our format today, we're going to be chatting with published author Dana Bell. And that is so exciting. And then if you stick around till the end, we're going to be doing a live writing exercise. If you've joined us on previous podcasts, you know we're going to be pulling up a prompt with the AI, and we're going to see what type of story can we write. Can we write a story that's better than the AI? I believe in us. I believe in you. All right. So, hopping straight into the podcast, we're going to be interviewing a very cool author. So today, I brought on Dana Bell. Dana Bell is a published paranormal romance author of 5 novels, including Winter Emergence, Winter Awakening, Bast's Chosen Ones, and many other stories in published anthologies. She has worked alongside many notable authors and frequently attends writing conventions. She is a teaching editor known for helping other writers by learning the craft and better understanding the business of being a writer. I would like to formally welcome to the stage Dana Bell. Hi, Dana. Welcome, welcome. I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today.
Very happy to be here.
In our previous conversations with our informal writing group online, I have absolutely loved your wisdom and expertise. And I could absolutely tell that you have so much experience. And I think a lot of our audience and a lot of especially beginning writers could really value from your wisdom. You've been through, I know you've have published novels, you've been to conventions, you worked with experienced authors, and I'm just so impressed. I'm like, I want to get to that level. That is so cool. So for our audience, why don't you just introduce yourself? Tell them a little bit about who you are and what your mission is.
Okay, so as I was introduced, I am Dana Bell. I have been writing since 3rd grade, or at least that is the earliest I remember writing anything. Started publishing on the amateur level in 1997 and professionally not until 2011, which it's a very interesting, long journey how I got there. Let's see, where do I start? As far as
thinking back to the writing journey, right?
Oh, it was an incredibly long time. I am very thankful for a lot of the professionals that I talked to because they were like, don't expect your first novel to be an instant success. Do not quit your day job. Do not do this, do not do that. Oh, and by the way, the persistent writer is the published one.
That's very much the truth. And I mean, clearly you've been successful as you've published quite a number of novels already. You're way ahead of me. We actually had a really great question in here.
Mm-hmm.
I know one of our viewers, John, asked traditional or indie published.
Small press.
Okay.
Small
What
press.
does that mean? Just
Small
assume that like
press.
I know nothing about publishing.
Okay, so small press is little publishers, normally run by one person.
Okay.
And I actually thoroughly enjoy working with small presses because you have a lot more say on your, like the one that I work for. She always
Mm-hmm.
asks me, what kind of vision do you have for the cover? And I'll go, well, I'd kind of like to see this, even though I know it's not going to turn out the way that I see it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm perfectly okay with that. It happens all the time, very, very used to it. So you actually have indie publishers. Now I
Okay.
have done a little bit of that just because I wanted to learn.
Okay.
I've done small press. I'm hoping to work with what do they call it, a medium?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're talking about the big New York City houses, what I write is not really commercially viable.
Okay.
That
Is that because so like I know you specialize in paranormal romance, correct?
paranormal romance is one of them. I'm
Is one of them. Gotcha.
science fiction, fantasy, horror, and paranormal romance.
Gotcha. Okay, as all of the genres. And is it so specifically because your type of stories aren't considered like mainstream or as mainstream friendly? Is that why?
If you understand how traditional houses work, when
Mm-hmm.
an editor gets something, she's not so concerned about your writing. She is concerned about what he or she
Mm-hmm.
is more concerned about, can I get this past the marketing department?
That makes sense, right? Because they're at the end of the day, they're a business, right? And as a big
Yeah.
business, they have to be focusing on the bottom line. Can they market that to get the return on the investment? That makes sense.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And that's actually how it was explained by somebody who works in traditional publishing.
That totally makes sense. And
Right.
then my guess is with the smaller publishing companies. So you said they're called press, like press.
It's a small press.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
a small press. Okay. So I imagine with that, since it's basically a one man, one person machine, there's much more flexibility in being a small
Mhm.
business owner.
Exactly.
You have the flexibility of being a type of mon pa shop as compared to being Facebook. I
Yeah.
totally, I absolutely get that.
Yeah. It's very, very different.
Mhm.
This particular publisher that I've actually worked with for since the beginning of my writing career.
Really? Have you been with the same press publisher since you started?
I have. I have worked also with a number of small presses. When I started publishing, there
Mm-hmm.
were a lot of small presses. Unfortunately, a lot of them have folded.
Okay. I
There's a
imagine it must be a very difficult industry to establish yourself in.
it is. It was very, very interesting. So I had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of opportunities that a lot of newer writers don't have now because
Mm-hmm.
they were looking for writers, they were looking for people. So I was like sending off like a story a week or a story
Okay.
every couple of weeks. And I did a lot of don't get paid other than a contributor's copy.
Oh no. So then you're kind of like doing all this in like the hopes that it will get attention or the hopes that you'll get paid on like future projects.
I was actually working more on publishing credits.
Gotcha. Okay. Because then you can speak to like, oh, this is my published work, makes you more of a notable name. That totally makes sense.
I was doing that. I mean, occasionally I would get paid and I would get a contributor's copy, and I'm cool with just getting a contributor's copy. One of the things I do
Mm-hmm.
is if there is a charity anthology,
Mm-hmm.
I will send a story. It's one of
Wow.
it's
Okay.
one of my ways of like paying it forward or paying it back. It's kind of a mix of both. Because it's like, oh, you're doing a charity anthology. Who is it for? Oh, that's fine. I can support that. Here's a story.
That's absolutely incredible. I know that you've been involved in quite a number of anthology books, and that must be quite a process being able to submit your story, right? So I imagine it's submitted as a standalone story, but then you're seeing it with the collection of other probably notable authors at sometimes. Do you ever get to like network and meet with these other authors that you work on the stories with?
Well, I've got one sitting here.
Ooh, okay. And while you're bringing that up, I just want to welcome Tish. Welcome back to the stream from Texas. Welcome, welcome. Let's see.
This,
It looks like we got the best of the planetary anthology series. You know, I actually almost highlighted that as the advertisement for the promo. I almost did that one.
yeah, this one was kind of amazing because it was in a smaller publishing house, which
Okay.
folded, and then another publishing house took over.
Okay.
And this, since I know we're going to be talking about networking later, this is one of the important things of being networked, because I had a story in the Mars anthology called Abandoned Children, which the editor fell in love with. He was so in love with it that he mentioned it specifically at Dragon Con.
Wow.
And I got to see the video of that because it was during the pandemic. And he mentioned it specifically. He said, "This is my favorite story in this anthology." And
that
keep
must have felt so like validating.
Oh, I was in tears. This is what women do when they're really happy about something, they cry. I was just head over whatever, because the story got mentioned, I got mentioned. He basically said, "Watch this author."
Oh, I mean, like, what more can one ask for, right? For us to put our stories out there and for it to be recognized and then reshared essentially from somebody, another author that you look up to and respect.
And here's
that's absolutely incredible.
Here's the outcome. Okay, this is a shared universe.
Okay.
And I specifically got invited by the same author.
Ooh, can you lift the book up just a little bit? Go this way. Perfect. So edited
angle here.
Beautiful. I know. Trying to like get in the webcam.
And this was the same editor who loved my story, Abandoned Children. And then he specifically invited me to contribute a story. The lucky thing is I already knew what kind of story he was looking for.
Okay. And was that, how was that? Was it because of his like style, or was it because you guys talked one-on-one?
Because he was so in love with Abandoned Children. To explain, the narrator was a sandcat. If you do not know what a sandcat is, look it up. They are a fascinating cat species who lives in the desert. So I used a sandcat as my narrator to tell the story. I knew when he asked me specifically to be in here, he wanted a cat story.
Okay.
He got a cat story, but he also got a gargoyle. I had two narrators. And the gargoyle was an it. Try writing a character that does not have a sex.
Ooh, a genderless character. That must be challenging. I feel like I need to like challenge myself with a genderless character at some point now. I try to think of what are like the most difficult types of characters I could write, and then I put them in my story.
Yeah.
Were you successful? Do you feel like you were successful in
I was extremely successful. The first draft, the gargoyle was a he, but in the second draft, the gargoyle informed me it was an it. And yes, my characters do that. He said,
hey, you know, any good writer or any writer who gets to a point probably hits that point where like your characters start coming to life, they start speaking to you, they start telling their story. That happens with me all the time. And then we just look crazy because we're like, no, I'm hearing voices. No, it's just our characters.
Yeah, the character was an it, and it was a little bit challenging to write a character who doesn't have sex. But considering it was a gargoyle, it made perfect sense that it was an it.
Interesting. So I know I want to get into like a little bit more about the publishing aspect and the networking shortly, but I actually wanted to learn a little bit more about your background as well as it pertains to writing. So like you were mentioning that you have like, you're referencing like cats. I know you have an absolute love for cats. Are using cats, and is that like a core theme in a lot of your storytelling?
Yes. About half of what I have published are cat stories.
And why is that? Is that just because you've had a love for cats just throughout your life?
I actually got introduced to cats in my late 20s, early 30s. And
Wow. Okay.
I absolutely fell in love with them, discovered they were the perfect companion animal for
Mm-hmm.
me. And to backtrack a little bit, Winter Awakening, which is the first book before Winter Emergence,
Mm-hmm.
I had 4 cats in the house.
Okay.
So all of my characters are referenced on my actual cats that I had at that time.
Okay.
And I don't know. I started, it was a college project that I actually expanded out into a novel. And since I lived with cats and I understood cat language and
Mm-hmm.
how they work, it just made sense to write this book from the cat's perspective. They're not the only animal in the book that has a perspective. So do the wolves. And yes, I did get to meet wolves in
Ooh, that's
person.
exciting. It did, and I'm actually, this is just like a random curiosity of mine because I'm writing a
Mhm.
book full of only animals. Does interacting with the animals, like it sounds like interacting with wolves and then cats, um, did that help make your animals and your stories come to life even more so?
Yes, it
Okay.
actually did. It
Okay.
did. Both of the wolves, let's see, one of the wolves that I interact with was at a refuge, and the other
Hmm.
one, we were in Arkansas someplace. And when I say
Hmm.
we, I'm talking about my ex-husband.
Okay.
Um, and the person who was there saying, "You better watch your fanny pack because the wolf has decided that's his."
Oh my
And
God.
I'm talking, and this wolf is like just slightly above my waist. I mean, he's a
Hmm.
big, big
Okay.
wolf. And I watched videos, I read about them, anything and everything that I could find. And I so now think like a wolf that I
Hmm.
become dominant when I meet a dog because they are descended from an ancient species of wolf that's now extinct.
Hmm.
And the dogs all know I'm an alpha.
They can just sense it.
They just sense it. And if you understand domestic cats, you can understand big cats because one of the other characters that is very prominent is the snow ghosts, or they're actually snow leopards.
Okay.
And if you know little cats, you know big cats because their behavior is similar enough.
Hmm.
And having been to refuges and zoos and watched the big cats, they're pretty much the same.
Interesting. I think it goes to show the level of research one has to do when they're working on a story, and especially when they're writing characters that are based off animals. Um, I feel like I need to start going to some zoos now if I want to like up my story to the next level. Although some of my animals, I don't know if if I'll ever get to meet them. Is so I'm curious.
Mhm.
Is Do you have a core philosophy as a writer, or like a style or something that you want your like readers to take away from after reading your stories?
That's a good question.
Hmm.
I write what I love to write. I think that's the bottom line is I write what I love to write.
Okay.
I have my own process on what I do.
Hmm.
And I'm at the point now where I don't struggle anymore.
Okay.
If I want to write, I sit down and I write
Okay.
and don't really need any more prompting than that. There is another step that I take, but it's not something that I talk about. But I write for the love of writing. That is the bottom line. If you want to know anything about it, I write.
Hmm.
I write because I love it. Not looking to make a lot of money. I don't care if I'm
Hmm.
ever on the bestseller list.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't care about any of that. Because as I've learned, if you're happy with what you're doing
Hmm.
and you're happy where you are, why worry about things that may never happen? Bestseller list, well, as I've already found out, and some pro writers recently pointed out, um, it's not always accurate.
I'm not surprised, right? My guess
Mhm.
is sometimes the authors or writers who get to that bestseller might not necessarily have the best stories, but might have the best marketing plans, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference, or maybe the most money. Now, I'm sure there are absolutely some great bestseller stories, but in the age of social media and digital awareness, right? I think the way that we're perceived is probably a huge aspect of it, is my guess.
And it's not always, and please don't, I'm not being negative here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just being honest. They basically said it doesn't really always matter on who's actually selling the most copies as to who gets on the bestseller list. That's about all
Really?
that's all the details I have.
Okay.
So I'm, like I said, I don't know. I know who said it, and I'm not gonna bring them into it.
No, yeah, that's fine. But I think that's a really interesting conversation, right? Of like, because I know a lot of writers, not only do they want to get their book published, but they think like, okay, when I get my book published, it'll be out there, people will buy it, it'll become a bestseller, and like that's success. Yeah.
You have to, as a writer, you have to redefine what you want for success. And I just recently have done this.
Yes, yes. Oh, I love that.
It's like, I write for the love of writing. I write this. I want to write the stories I want to write. I don't want some agent telling me you have to write this kind of story in order to hit the bestseller list. It's like, I don't care about the bestseller list. It's just not what I want to do. And I've actually been managing my own writing career. People ask you, don't you have an agent? Nope, don't need one.
Interesting. Well, that's good. And I know there's has it made it I guess easier? Has it made it more of an obstacle not having an agent to represent you as compared to having to do the work yourself to get the stuff published?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
It really hasn't been an obstacle. It's only an obstacle if you're trying to get into certain markets.
Gotcha. So you think a huge factor is probably the type of market that you want to be in, or maybe the type of story that you're writing.
Yeah. If you want to be with Baen Books or Tor, or which I concentrate mostly on the science fiction markets. I'm looking at the paranormal romance market, but I haven't really gotten brave enough because I don't want to write that way. My romances are PG-13, maybe R. I don't want to get so graphic that I'm like, no. I've read you have to understand, I've read the whole gambit from sweet all the way to you've got to be kidding me. I got tired of the you've got to be kidding me and gone kind of the opposite direction with my writing. I keep it a lot softer than normal. It's like off stage. You don't need to see this.
I think that's really powerful for really understanding, right? Not just your writing style, but the type of story that you want to tell is going to best work towards a type of reader. Some stories are more geared towards like Tor books or like bigger publishing houses. And I think it's a matter of understanding who your reader is, and then also understanding the type of story that you want to tell, and like the things that you will do, the things that you won't do. I think that probably factors into how do I publish it? Where do I publish it? How do I market? Do I need an agent? Yes or no? That's some absolutely great advice though. That really is. Let me think. So you've published a lot. So you've touched upon a number of working with not choosing an agent, but you've talked with working with other writers and anthologies. You've worked with not traditional, but small press publishing. And it sounds like you've networked with a lot of different writers throughout your time as a writer. So I want to get into the meat of this, right? Networking with other writers, editors, publishers, the whole shebang. So digging into it, first off, when we talk about like networking with other writers, why should it be important for writers to network in the first place?
There's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it is just friendship.
Okay.
I have a lot of friends who are writers. Part of it is sometimes your lead to your next anthology may come from another writer.
Interesting. And I know you spoke to the one story earlier with getting into that one, was it the science fiction anthology?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's that. I started at my local science fiction convention.
Okay.
And I met someone who, how do I explain this? I knew someone who was an editor of a magazine. The magazine has since been closed, but I got some poetry and a silly little story called Tumbling Tumbleweed. It really is a very silly little story.
Okay.
The idea came from the fact that they were on the news, they were showing these houses buried in tumbleweeds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote this silly little story called Tumbling Tumbleweeds, also based on an old Western song that not many people would know nowadays.
Fun. And I mean, I think that that's a great thing to do, right? Use something as a reference that worked previously, and we're just taking it for a new modern audience.
Yeah, it was fun to do. So that was one avenue, and I had met the same publishing house that I'm working with. I had met her as she's a friend, she's an editor, and she's also my publisher.
Aww.
And she literally was doing an anthology called All About Eve. She walks up to me at the end of the convention, looks at me, and she says, "I want a story from you."
Aww.
And I went,
that must have been a really sweet moment, actually.
and I was like, oh, I was kind of like surprised. I was like, oh, okay.
Was that was unexpected?
Totally unexpected. She got a cat story. And yes, I do write a lot of cat stories. And she got a cat story that was completely different than anything else she had in the anthology.
Interesting. And then I'm sure readers reading the anthology, anyone who loves cats would be like, oh, wow, she knows what she's talking about with cats.
It was strange because the story started in Rocky Mountain National Park. So that was really fun. And the same editor who had done the Tumbling Tumbleweed story was also working with a small press.
Okay.
This is something I'm going to tell the authors. Please don't be afraid to take risks. I call it jumping off a cliff. I found out he was doing the space horrors.
Okay.
Anthology. It was invite only, and I should probably explain that to you guys. But I went to him and said, "Can I have an invite? You will get a cat vampire story." No idea how I was going to write this cat vampire story.
Okay.
And these are just examples of how networking, how knowing people help you get someplace. He got a cat vampire story, and that cat vampire story got a lot of mentions because it's completely different from anything else in the anthology.
Interesting. So it sounds like that a lot of the value that you got from networking was getting like that friendship value with other writers, being able to probably relate with other writers and relate, especially when sometimes the writing process can be challenging at times. And then also it sounds like it opened up some doorways and opportunities to get into different types of writing projects.
Yeah. And since I'm also doing this on Facebook, I'm in a couple of different groups. And if you're in the right group, you hear about writing opportunities that pop up.
Interesting. Okay. And when you speak of like writing opportunities, do you mean like the anthologies like you've previously been a part of, or more like writing jobs, or like what opportunities do you generally see?
The ones that I'm seeing, and I'm going to put this out here. If you are on Facebook, please go up in your little search bar and put open calls in your search.
Good. That's actually really good. I'm going to put that into the chat as well because it's actually really good.
That way, there's all kinds of open calls that are open on Facebook. And it's another way to find more writing jobs. What anthologies do for you is they give you practice. They give you practice hitting a deadline. They give you practice writing to a certain theme. They get you exposure and get your name in front of an editor. Now,
Interesting. Yeah, because it's free exposure essentially. Since you're not, if you have a small following, it's not focused on your own. Now you're relying on also like 10
Right.
other writers or whoever's in it. Yeah, that makes sense.
And here's the thing, if you get
Mhm.
a personal comment back from an editor, that
Mhm.
is gold, guys. That is gold.
Really?
I had, let's see, in the anthology before this,
Mhm.
well, the last two anthologies, the one, I can't remember what it was called, Ring of Fire. I had
Okay.
3 stories that came in that were almost there, but they weren't really going to fit. So I wrote back
Okay.
a comment to each of those authors saying, look, this is a great story. Here's where it needs work.
Mhm.
It's not, I don't want to see it back, but you've got a good potential here. What might work for another market. In my
Mhm.
last anthology, which is Space Brides LLC,
Okay.
which is kind of a combination of romance and science fiction, I got in a story that needed work. And I went through and I told the author why. And I said, oh, and by the way, I know of another editor who is doing an anthology using the theme that you have in your story. Here's
Okay.
the link. And then I turned around and contacted the editor and said, hey, I've got the story that came into me. It's not going to work for me, but it might work for you. And then I asked him, do you want to know the name of the author? You want the title of the story? He said, yes. Now, I did this because I happen to know the editor. And so I'm pretty sure he was watching for that story to come in. So
Interesting. Okay.
these kinds of things will happen in the writing world. This is why you need to be networked. I've got, somewhere between 7 and 8 editors in my network.
Wow, and that's just from putting yourself out there. Is so for writers who are still or maybe not as familiar with the networking process. So you shared Facebook. It sounds like Facebook is an absolute great
Mm-hmm.
avenue for networking. I myself have found a lot of success. Also, having met you through Facebook, which is
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love. What other types of strategies do you suggest for writers who want to network more with maybe other writers or potentially other editors or publishers even?
If you're into science fiction,
Hmm.
there are cons everywhere. All you have to do is go into Google and see where your nearest one is, because it's a great way to meet people. I mean,
Hmm.
I know Carrie Vaughn, who is a New York Times
Wow.
best-selling author, and we
Wow, that's
actually talk
exciting.
off and on. Carol Berg is
Hmm.
in there. Kevin J. Anderson, his wife
Wow.
Rebecca, both of which know me by name. Um,
And that was just from meeting them by going to a convention.
Going by to conventions.
Interesting. Okay. What's a convention experience like? I've never been to a convention, but I know that I want to go. Like what's it like going to one?
Okay, there's science fiction conventions are a little bit different than writing conferences.
Okay. Is it more like about like the fan aspect of it?
Well, science fiction conventions kind of are multifaceted.
Okay.
Um, they're specialized. We have gaming cons, we have costuming cons, we have
Mhm.
literary. Literary
Mhm.
is the ones that I primarily go to.
Okay.
This is where you meet the authors, the editors, the publishers, if they're there.
Okay.
Um, this is where you would get a chance to go listen to best-selling authors. Most of my education before I started publishing was because I'd go listen to people like Connie Willis,
Mhm.
and I don't remember who else, but I've gotten to meet George R. R. Martin. I've gotten to,
Wow. Oh, that's exciting.
I even got to meet Richard Hatch, which was really cool.
Wow. Sounds like you met, and this is just from going to some of these conventions.
This is just from going to the conventions. There's also media cons. Uh,
Media cons. Okay.
media,
What's a media con?
media con is anything connected to TV and movies.
Gotcha. That totally makes sense. So, would you say that cons are essentially that like next level in person type of experience too? Basically, meet either writers at the same level or writers at the next level.
Definitely.
Hmm.
I could tell you who all of the writers were who started out about the same time I did.
Hmm.
I know where most of them are at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were in my hands as an editor. I'm so proud of my kids.
Aw.
So proud of my kids. So it's it. I don't know where my thought was going on that, but that's
No worries.
that's where you're going. Science fiction conventions are just a great place to go and meet. They're a great place
Mm-hmm.
to play games if you're into gaming. They're great places to meet authors. Please don't be afraid to walk up and talk to one of the writers. I mean, I walked up and introduced myself to Lawrence Watt Evans, and I said, "I'm sorry, I don't
Mm-hmm.
have anything for you to sign for me, but I really wanted to meet you." And he was kind of taken back because it was not something that you normally say to
Mm-hmm.
somebody. I got to meet Barbara Hambly and found out that a certain Star Trek book is also her favorite, which is one of my favorite Star Trek
Ooh.
books. And it it was just it's a great way to meet those people that you're reading their work and you're going, I really like to meet them. Just a large portion of your science fiction writers are very,
Mm-hmm.
very friendly. They're very approachable. They do
Mm-hmm.
not bite.
I could definitely see that. I think for me, I've never been afraid of just going up and introducing myself to people and right establishing hopefully a connection. Um, has that always come easy to you? Of like you go to a convention, there's people just like I'm just gonna go and talk to a random person I've never met before.
No. Um, I was the one that would go hide in the corner. You wouldn't believe it with how comfortable I am with doing it now. But I was the one who
Wow,
would
I would never guess just from the way that you carry yourself. I would never guess that you would be the exact opposite. So like what changed?
um, part of it was getting older.
Okay.
Part of it was the fact that I actually went back to college later in life.
Okay.
I made 3 attempts to get my bachelor's degree. And
Mm-hmm.
when I went back for the 3rd time, I'm also a speech minor because
Okay.
I'm a creative writing major, speech minor. And one of the things that I knew was you're gonna have to be able to do readings at conventions. So let's
So it
take
was kind of like a skill that you had to practice.
I had to learn, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I already had some drama background. My readings my readings that I do at cons get compliments from professional writers.
Ooh, that's exciting. Do you really enjoy doing a reading?
I do, I love it. I absolutely love it because
I
I'm
do. I do live readings on my like Saturday show every day. You would be more than welcome to come join me if you ever wanted to do a reading.
ooh, I'll have to keep that in
Right.
mind.
If there's one thing that I realized I've enjoyed, it's doing readings. And I think it speaks to my acting background a little bit.
Mhm.
But I didn't realize that I'd enjoy it until I started doing it.
Yeah, I love it. I was stunned to get some of the compliments that I did, particularly from pro writers.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one of the skills that I learned. The first one I did was at Worldcon in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about being totally intimidated and a last minute addition.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there and I'm reading and my voice is shaking and my body is shaking. Um, the more I practiced, the more comfortable I got. I'm at the point where like, just do it. You're going to have fun. I look forward to it now.
Aw.
So it takes a little time to get past
Mm-hmm.
that shy wallflower to actually enjoying being out in the public. The biggest thing
Mm-hmm.
you have to remember, and I actually covered this recently, like yesterday,
Okay.
with a new author that I was working with on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
like because they were talking about being terrified going to conventions. I'm like, look, please remember that when you go to conventions, you are working with a whole bunch of people who are
Mm-hmm.
introverts, just like you are.
I'm not surprised.
And
I'm
that
not
was
surprised by that.
it was a bit, I think, probably a big shock for them to realize these are all introverts just like you are.
Mm-hmm.
I have to take an extra day off to recover on Monday because cons are usually Friday through Sunday, and I usually
Mm-hmm.
take Monday off to recover because it's exhausting.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, I could imagine how much just like time, planning, energy, the whole shebang, especially if it's a con that's not even in your immediate area, right? Because then you're doing traveling and all the expenses. How because probably I imagine investing in a con, right? You're investing time and money
Mhm.
when there's so many options out there. And I imagine maybe a lot of writers might not have as much to invest in quite so many. How do you pick that right one if you haven't been to a con yet when it's too many options?
Go to your local con.
Okay.
Go to your local con, your closest local con.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've done for years. I was going
Mm-hmm.
just to local conventions. I think my
Gotcha. And that probably saves a lot on time and money, I imagine.
it does. It saves a lot of time, a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one that I go to, it's a 20-minute commute to and a 20-minute commute back. Of course, I also have a special needs cat, so I actually have to come home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's different when we have pets, right? And we have a responsibility.
Yeah, sorry, got a cat demanding attention right now. Um, yeah, it's not a really bad special need, but it is a special need that he has that I have to make sure he's eating the correct food, basically.
Aw, but that he probably also gives you inspiration whenever you're working on your writing.
Actually, he's the one sitting there screaming, going, "Mom, I want your attention. Mom, ignore the computer. Mom, mom."
Talk about trying to write with distractions.
Yeah, well, I'm good at it. I've learned. I'm just want to touch on writing conferences because writing
Okay.
conferences are also a good investment.
Okay.
I've been to Pikes Peak twice. I have
Okay.
not been to my local one here in Denver because I don't like the area of town that it's in.
Okay. And then when you speak of like a writing conference, right? So it's essentially a conference that's around the actual art of writing itself. And
Well,
does it usually have more like generalized speakers at those, or like what? I guess how is that going to be different than like more of like a fan sci-fi type convention?
it's different because they have writers from different genres. There's also
Gotcha. So you're kind of getting okay. That makes
yeah,
sense.
and it's more of a training platform. I mean,
Okay.
we do have at science fiction conventions, there are panels on writing.
Okay.
It's a little bit more intense in a writing conference.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell that story, but I thought about it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell that story. But it was a good experience. What I actually
Mhm.
kind of learned from going to the writing conferences, I kind of went a little too soon in my writing career.
Interesting. Why you went too soon to a writing convention in your career? Why is that?
I wasn't really ready.
Okay. And ready as in like you don't have enough like work written yet, or you weren't ready to like be around a room full of introverts yet?
It was just well, I just realized this recently that I actually went a little too early in my career. I should have waited a few years until I'd got a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more experience and then gone. But
Mm-hmm.
it was a good way to kind of learn like different writing things and
Mm-hmm.
meet with editors and agents. I don't meet agents, but meet with editors.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't have anything like ready for them, which is one of the reasons it was a little too early.
Okay.
But it was an interesting experience because I went twice to Colorado Springs and another one way up in the mountains somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that one was interesting because that was a totally different genre. I do two different markets, just so everybody knows.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I work two different markets. And that's one of them was in that specialized market. The other one was like just kind of general. Um, but it's interesting. Occasionally I am now starting to notice now that a lot of our
Mm-hmm.
local science fiction writers are becoming more and more involved with the Pikes Peak Writing Conference.
Okay.
That's in Colorado Springs, which is like an hour or so away. But they're becoming more and more involved down there, and I'm really liking to see that because that was needed.
Interesting. So when we talk about like different conventions, especially I'm going to say probably a lot of our writers out here are probably coming from a bunch of different genres. I
Mhm.
tend to see a mix of fantasy, sci-fi, thriller, and some romance in this audience generally, with a healthy mix of nonfiction. Um, what is there one writing style convention that you would recommend?
I would do whatever your closest general one is,
Mhm. Okay, so
because
start with the local one because that's going to
start
keep your
with your
costs
local,
down. Mhm.
because they also, since there are nonfiction writers as well, That's a good place for nonfiction writers to go. I will say this much about the romance market. There is a yearly convention.
Oh, I have to say he's behind you. He just wanted to make an appearance.
Yeah, that's Taj, everybody. The Romance Writers of America does have a yearly conference.
Okay.
Just Google them if you want to go. They do travel from city to city. I think last year, was it this year? This year, I think they're in Dallas, or maybe that was last year. I keep forgetting we're in 2024 now. But they do move around quite a bit. I think this year's in Philadelphia, actually. I'm not sure. Look it up. But they do travel around quite a bit. So there is that one if you want to go. But make sure when you do writing conferences that there is something in your genre that you want to learn. That's kind of the important thing about conferences.
So it's important going into a conference with being clear on what like value you want to get out of it. Does that make a huge difference?
That makes sense. What do you want? What do you want to learn? And
as compared to I just want to go to a convention to meet people.
Yeah, so there's that too. It's kind of a combination. Writing conferences is more what do you want to learn? What do you think you could learn? And they're great for giving you prep for what you expect. And I would not suggest pitching to an editor on your first conference.
Interesting. So does that end up happening a lot? Like probably newer writers go, I'm like, my story's ready. I need to go find a publisher. Is that a thing that happens?
It is a constant thing that happens.
Interesting. So if you're a writer and you just finished your story and you want to get a publisher, what's your recommendation?
Do your research.
Okay. Yep. I would agree with that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Go do your research first before you start looking for a publisher. In fact, while you're writing your story, don't even be thinking about publishing, because your number one goal is finish the story. Your next step after that, and I do this with beginning writers all the time, your next step is put that story away for a couple of weeks.
So that way it gives it some time to breathe, right? And are you talking about after you finish writing the rough draft of it, or after you've gone through a couple drafts?
I actually recommend that right after you finish your rough draft, because you need to get away from it to be able to, when you go back, you get fresh perspective. Then go through and do your rewrite if you want. Then, if you are part of a critique group, get it critiqued. If you are looking for beta readers, get beta readers for feedback. Do not say, now I need an editor. It's like, you are not anywhere near needing an editor yet. And you only need to hire an editor if you are self-publishing. Please, please, please do not be one of these writers who, my book is finished, I'm going to throw it up on Kindle. There are so many horrible, awful books on there. And for someone like me, who is also an editor, you'll lose me within the first 4 paragraphs. I will not read your book, and I will never look at your stuff again. And is that
because it feels like they're trying to advertise the book as compared to building a relationship with an editor or publisher?
Yeah. And you do want to build, if you can build a relationship with one. I know of a lot of successful ones that have gone for years. I also know of a lot of pro writers who are now going independent.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is very interesting, odd trend. So
why do you think that is? Do you think they're just done with the traditional publishing route?
I've never actually asked them.
Interesting. So it sounds like we're going to have to get a pro writer at one point. I'm kind of curious now.
Yeah. There's a couple of writers in our area who've done that. One of them, she writes a paranormal romance series that I absolutely adore. And the other one is a New York Times bestselling author. And he actually has his own publishing house. In fact, he teaches new publishers how to be a publisher.
Wow. Okay. That's actually kind of cool.
Program. And
it's actually kind of cool.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Same person who is part of the for the Superstars Writing Conference, which
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend any science fiction writer to go to.
Interesting. So if you're a science fiction out there, science fiction writer, you recommend the Superstars Conference?
Definitely the Superstars
Okay.
Writing Conference. Now,
Okay.
I not knowing the audience, I will say if you are a Christian science fiction writer, and I am in both fields,
Mm-hmm.
Realm Makers is the one you want to go to.
Realm Makers. Okay.
So
That sounds fun. That sounds absolutely fun. I think if I were to go to one, I would probably, I feel like I would probably go to a writing specific. I don't know. I'd want to go to a fantasy one, but then maybe a writing. I'd have to decide.
yeah. I attended Superstars in 2015. It's on my
Mm-hmm.
calendar to do next year.
Mm-hmm.
And Realm Makers, I'm attending virtually because it's a ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'd have all kinds of expenses, and you're looking at like a $3,000 or $4,000 trip. So
Yeah. And you're like, that's something you really have to plan out for, right?
yeah, that's really it can be when you're traveling and you have to do food. Not some
Mm-hmm.
but some writing conferences do provide food, but
Mm-hmm.
everything's like kind of extra in a lot
Yeah,
of
that
places.
totally makes
So
sense.
it's you have to budget for many different things, but
Mm-hmm.
they are well worth going to. Like I said, I've got Superstars on my thing for next year, on top of
Gotcha. Okay.
the major trip that I'm planning. So I'm hoping to do Round Makers virtually again this year.
Okay. That's really cool. Hopefully those are turn out to be some great experiences for you.
It's been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's been very interesting.
As a side note,
Mhm.
where we're hitting a good point in our podcast, so I actually want to throw this out to you, the audience. So if you're here in the stream, I want to now give you the opportunity. What questions do you have? I want to encourage you, if you want to throw up any questions that you have for either myself or Dana about the writing process, or about conventions, or about how to meet other writers, editors, publishers, give us your questions. So I wanted to put that out there. And while I'm waiting
Mhm.
on the chat, I wanted to ask, are there any other resources, or are there any other strategies that you recommend for like networking with others? So far, I know we focused a lot on, like, you've touched on Facebook and you've touched on
Mhm.
conventions, but if I'm like a new writer and like my book's done, like, how do I find that like right publisher?
Uh, that is actually going to be a roll of the dice.
Okay.
I hate to put it that way, but it
Mm-hmm.
really is. And it's your goals. Do you want to go to a big house traditional? Bear in
Mm-hmm.
mind that if somebody likes your book, they got to get it past the marketing department. If the marketing department says no, you got to start all over again. Go to your public library. Look for the writer's market book. There's every year there is a writer's market book.
Okay.
So go to your public library. Use your I'm gonna say that right here. Use your public library.
I absolutely love that. If I have such respect for libraries as general, especially with their still their relevance in our day and age of being in a
Mhm.
digital atmosphere and ecosystem. So I actually really respect that.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of books on writing there. But
Mm-hmm.
the writer's market, and there may be some specialized. There are also books on specialized writer markets that you
Mm-hmm.
may want to take a look at. But that is your best place to start.
Okay.
This is what I did back in the
Mm-hmm.
day before we had computers.
Right before the age of the internet.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
before the internet. Um, so that's what I started. And this is one of the things I'm finding with new writers is they're
Mm-hmm.
actually kind of not taking the types of steps they should take.
You think they're just like rushing into the process because they're excited about getting their book out there?
I think it's more of just kind of an experience.
Okay.
They didn't really have what I've had, which is people who kind of helped and guided me. And
Mm-hmm.
there are too many people that I could even name.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you go to a convention and you've got a writer that says, if you got questions, I got a few minutes,
Mm-hmm.
take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
Don't hire
Absolutely,
people.
right? I think like relying on advice of writers who are doing it successfully, right? I think on social media, we see a lot of writers who might not have done it successfully quite yet, but I think people who've proven it is a good starting place, especially at conventions.
Yeah, one of the people I got to sit down and talk to was I'd gone to a panel that had Christy Golden on it, and she said, "You know, I made a lot of mistakes in my writing
Mhm.
career. I don't want you to have to do that. If you got any questions, I've got a few minutes." So, guess who sat down and talked to Christy Golden?
Mhm.
So
Aw, that must have been so cool.
it was, and this is what I mean. Most of your science fiction writers are very approachable. They're like,
Mhm.
we have a very nurturing, very yes, I know, very mentoring mentality. Ed Bryant, who sadly is no longer with us, was very, very supportive of me as a writer.
Interesting. Okay.
And he was actually on the first panel that I actually ran at our local convention. I was so nervous. I had somebody that I knew and was a friend, and then I had Ed Bryant, and I'm like going, "Oh my, Ed Bryant."
I'm
Um,
talking with them.
and he actually afterwards came up and said, "You did a really good job."
Aw, that must have been so validating. That's amazing.
It was, and I was on his radar from that point onward.
Right.
So,
And I think it just goes to show, right? You putting yourself out there as a writer, you don't know who's watching, you don't know who's going to respond. But my one of my mottos, if you do nothing, nothing happens.
yep. And
Hmm.
it's very much like that. I have
Hmm.
done a couple of out of town cons.
Hmm.
At one of them, I met another new writer who was starting about the same time I was,
Hmm.
and I had gone to sat on a panel. He was in that there, and he and I had a nice conversation afterwards.
Hmm.
He became somebody that I called on. It's like, hey, I'm doing a dragon anthology. Got a dragon story?
Hmm.
And I've actually kind of kept track of him ever since. I know a lot of his past history. I know what he's been
Hmm.
through. I'm very happy where his life is right now. He does a lot of he runs his own editing business. He's done
Hmm.
books for Bain. Again, I'm very proud of him.
Hmm.
I know what he's been through and where he's at now. It's
Aw.
like, yay. Um, it
That,
was
that, that's so rewarding, especially when you see somebody growing like that. Oh, that's so
it
cool. I feel
is
that same way when I network with other writers and then seeing their success, and I'm like, yes, you're doing something right. Oh, I love it. Um,
that's
a-
go
as
ahead.
a side note, I just wanted to touch on one of our viewers was saying, Mommy Telly was saying, I think the last Writer's Market was published in 2019. It's now the Writer's Handbook.
Okay, that's good.
So I think that was a good call. So if there's any of you writers out there who are who go looking for it, it sounds like they've rebranded as the Writer's Handbook. Absolutely. And then we had a really great question from Tish
Mhm.
here. Looks like Tish asked, what resources do you use to create your marketing plan? You're like, this is probably a whole topic within itself.
It is a whole topic
Hmm.
because here's the thing. As a writer, you wear many, many, many hats.
Hmm.
And that is whether you go traditional or independent or something else,
Hmm.
you are still going to be responsible for marketing your own book.
And that's
I'm-
assuming that you're going the self-publishing route. If you
No,
go
this
through like
is
traditional publishing, won't
it's
they?
no, 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 no. It's the same thing.
Really interesting. Okay.
It is the same thing. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
who you go with. You are responsible for marketing. They will actually ask you for your marketing platform.
Interesting. So what would be the point of going with a publishing house then if you're still going to be required to do the marketing
You're still going to, well, you have to still do the marketing. This is
regardless? Hmm.
I think this is one of the reasons that a lot of the bigger authors are now going independent. It's like, well, if I still have to
Hmm.
do the marketing, why don't I just do it
Gotcha.
myself? Um,
Yeah, it's like if you already have to do the work regardless, why am I going to pay or invest time with a publishing house when I have to do the same thing? That actually
exactly.
makes sense. Do you have any like recommendations or best practices for marketing or putting your book out there?
Number one, if particularly if you're independent,
Hmm.
you're going to do a lot of work. I know authors who go to you put money aside for buying a table.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they will actually give you a membership to whatever. Sometimes they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Find a way to take electronic money.
Mm-hmm. And
Oh,
that's just a matter of like going through Square or
yeah,
Stripe and buying one of those devices. That is actually something that's very easy to do.
which is something I'm going to have to be doing here before too long.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to cancel everything for the past couple of years due to some circumstances beyond my control.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to travel. Can't do that right now. Find a way to go see how other authors are displaying their books.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what works best for you.
Mm-hmm. That's a great strategy, right? Understand what's working well in the market and then copy certain practices and make it your own.
Yeah, and do
Mm-hmm.
that. Don't be afraid to talk to people. You are going to have to do a lot of talking. You're going to have to get used to the fact that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to come look at your stuff and probably never buy anything.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, if you are at a science fiction convention, Sunday is going to be your biggest day.
You said Sunday?
Sunday. This is why.
Okay.
This is a very interesting thing.
I mean, that makes sense. More people probably out and about and more likely to be in like, well, why is it?
Okay, here's the thing that you have to understand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to use my local one for an example.
Okay.
On Friday nights, when the art show opens, if you want a piece of art, you go there first and you out and out buy it. What people do with authors and books is they will go through and they will look at the authors. They'll sit and chat with you.
Mm-hmm.
They may not buy anything that day. Sunday is the big buying day because that's when they've already paid for the hotel room. They've done all their meals. And if they have any money left over, guess what they're going to do?
They're going to go buy things that they build an emotional connection with, right?
Exactly.
Oh, this really cool book. Yeah, I have some extra money. Yeah, it's actually really smart. I wouldn't have thought of it like that.
Well, I only know because I've sat with my publisher a lot and I've watched stuff. One of the other interesting things that I noticed the last time that my publisher was there is I was actually at her booth and helped her sell a number of my books because I was standing there and I'm like, oh, do you want me to sign it? Oh, and that's another thing. If they are your book, always offer to sign and always ask.
And do you offer the signing as like a free thing or do you offer that as like, that's like its own monetized thing or like?
It's free. Please sign your book for free. And always ask them, do you want it customized? And if they say, well, yeah, I'd like to have it customized. Okay, what's your name? And it can go either way. Sometimes they'll say, oh, just sign it. Or they're like, yeah, and my name is, or if they haven't offered their name, okay, what's your name? And be friendly, smile. You don't have to be outgoing. Sorry, cat trying to climb up on something he's not supposed to be. But like I said, just remember that you're also at a convention with introverts. That's the most thing I really want to emphasize. They're just as shy about talking to you as you are about them to them. And you kind of have to get over that as an author. Talk to people. Even if you're only talking about your cat.
Yep. And I want to throw in as like, I know both of us have had a lot of customer service experience. There's going to be times where you talk to people and the conversation fails tremendously. But there's going to be times where you talk to people and you'll like find actual friends.
Yeah.
It's the practice, right? The more reps you do, the more conversations you have, the better you'll get at it.
Yeah. And that's a big, huge deal. I know a lot of writers who sell their own books. And some of them are with big publishing houses and they still sell their own books.
And so do you usually see like a lot of these writers are marketing predominantly through going to these conventions? Or do they just have really strong like social media marketing campaigns?
They have kind of a combination of both.
Okay.
I know one writer who is tremendously successful because he traveled a lot in his early writing career.
Mm-hmm.
And he would go to conventions that he is so well networked, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
He's at the point where I think he's like only working part-time, and he is actually making money at writing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's another one that started around the same time I did. And I keep my eye on him.
Okay. So, and it's kind of like paying attention, right, to writers or authors who, are doing something right.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing is there's a lot of people who I know and talk to all the time, and I watch certain people.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a brand new author that I'm watching, which is kind of funny because he's one of my success stories because I helped him out as an editor.
Aw.
And I watch him and what he's doing right now
Mm-hmm.
so that I learn. But I'm also aware of the fact there are people watching me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very, very careful, particularly on my social media, and I cannot
Mm-hmm.
stress this enough. Please be mindful of what you say on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Be very mindful of what you say on social media, because that can come back and bite you in the wrong place.
I'm not surprised to hear that, especially when we live in a very and at times a divisive internet. Absolutely. People are very, very opinionated, and I could see how you could say one thing and it could be taken completely out of context.
And I've had that
Absolutely.
happen too. And I noticed somebody has popped up a comment. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think I'm just lucky since I've been on this journey so far. I haven't had to deal with that yet. But then I asked myself, I'm like, all right, well, how do I deal with it? I'm like, all right, I'll invite them to a live stream and I will debate it because I feel confident in my ability to win a debate. But actually, so I have a random question about
okay.
The marketing. Do you have much experience or much knowledge with crowdfunding? This was another like thing I've been thinking about in the future, if that's like a right move for doing like a crowdfunding or pre-sales, using that as a marketing strategy.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't used it. It's
Okay.
really one of the things on my list to learn about.
Okay.
This is one of the reasons I want to go to Superstars next year.
Well, it sounds like maybe we can like go on this like learning journey together. That's something I was thinking about, but I'm like, all right, well, what's like the right way? I'm sure there's pros and cons against doing a crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah,
But I still haven't dug into it quite yet.
there are people who are doing it. Kevin J. Anderson is doing, I don't think he calls it that, but he's doing something similar quite successfully.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the influencers I listened to, they were saying that one of the most successful book author crowdfunding campaigns was Brandon Sanderson.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most like successful crowdfunding campaigns of all time. So I was like, okay, so clearly I have to check it out and see how he did it and what he did right.
I think it's more of who he is.
Right. And like that could be another thing, right? So like if you don't have a big name, right? So then it's understanding, did he win because of the brand name or did he win because of the strategy? Maybe a mix of both.
Well, here's the very interesting thing. I remember him when he started out.
I do too. I remember getting into him around the time that he got into the what was it? Wheel of Time? When he got I was like Wheel of Time. Yeah, I remember when he started joining that series. That must have been like 15, 20 years ago. Maybe. Like that was a while back. But I think he already had Mistborn out. I think Mistborn was already out.
Yeah,
At
I
that
don't
time.
remember. I honestly don't remember where it was. I just remember him sitting at tables at conventions.
Right. And that just goes to show, right? Like you never know who you meet at a convention, where they're going to go in their journey. So
Mm-hmm.
network with everybody. Absolutely.
Definitely network with everybody. It's you kind of never know. It's very, very interesting.
Well, I think we've had some absolutely great questions and some great conversations. I actually have one last question for you.
Okay.
Like I always have to ask everybody this. if tomorrow were your last day on Earth and you could leave behind one final quote for writers, authors, publishers everywhere, what would that quote be?
I actually have an answer for that.
Ooh, all right. Okay.
I have what I call the 4 Ps for
Okay.
writers. The first one is passion. Have a passion for your craft.
Okay.
The second one is patience, because it's going to take you a while.
Okay.
Practice, practice, practice. And the last one is persistence.
Ooh, I'm going to write this down. Passion,
Passion, patience,
practice,
practice,
persistence.
persistence. Because the one I love to pull up and share with everybody is, please remember that it took George R.R. Martin 30 years to become an overnight success.
And we also have to remember that George R.R. Martin, his early career, he was a television writer in a working writer's room, and he was unsuccessful because he wanted to write his style of writing, bring it to the screen, and they said no. This was during the early age of television. He wanted to do Game of Thrones type stuff. They're like, no, people aren't going to buy that. So he said he quit Hollywood. He went and wrote his books. They became bestsellers. And then they came back to him years later.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
He worked on Beauty and the Beast, the original Beauty and the Beast.
Right? That just goes to show, right? Like look at that time difference from Beauty and the Beast to then Game of Thrones. The books themselves are bestsellers, but then them being picked up by HBO and becoming phenomenons when the Game of Thrones was in its prime. Absolutely.
Yeah, everybody was talking about it. I've never seen it.
I was an absolute fan, so I know much about it. I do hope we get those final books out of his series eventually.
Oh, and that's another thing with writers. Please bear in mind that we have a lot on our plate. Sometimes something happens. Winter Awakening, which is the first book in the trilogy, came out in 2011. The second book came out in early 2024 because my life fell apart at some point in between point A and point B.
And I think that's something that we don't always take into account with our favorite authors. We're like, okay, I'm done with this book. I love it. I need the next one right now. But writing a book takes time. And sometimes that's not the only thing on our schedules, especially when writers start growing in acclaim. Then they have to be doing like interviews and press and doing all the other things. Then what if they want to work on another book? And it becomes a whole ordeal.
It's, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Dana, I just want to thank you for joining me today.
Well, you're very welcome.
This has been an absolutely incredible experience. And like, once again, like I knew that I made the absolute right choice in bringing you on because like you're so knowledgeable and you're very easy to chat with.
Lots of practice.
Well, I'm hoping we'll get to network at a convention. I know doing conventions is definitely in my future, simply because I'm planning on trying to meet every creative writer in the world. The only way to do that is go to the conventions. Now, what I'm actually going to be hopping into. So for our audience, I'm going to be hopping into a live writing exercise. Dana, you're more than welcome to join if you'd like. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to pull up ChatGPT. We're going to put it in a prompt, get an image, and then use that for a 20-minute free write.
I think I'm going to pass. I got to go take care of my laundry.
Totally no worries. Like it's Sunday, and Sunday's kind of like the day to really catch up on things before the week.
Yeah, but definitely, I've definitely enjoyed it, and thank you everyone for showing up. It was great.
Oh, well, I would love to have you again sometime.
Okay.
But thank you, absolutely thank you again for your time, Dana. This has been really cool, and I can just tell from the comments on my end, there's been a lot of excitement just talking about the like conventions and the learning experience, and how much fun they've been having. They touched upon like the fear of talking with other introverts and a lot of the topics that we've been discussing. So there's definitely been a very active comments and a lot of excitement throughout.
I'm glad to hear that. Guys, I can be reached on Facebook. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask me a question. I don't bite.
Yes, and this is actually a good touch on. If you want to know more about Dana, if you want to know more about what she's doing, more about her fan page, or more about her upcoming novel, I know you said you have your 6th novel coming up, which super exciting. You can actually know more. I'm going to post the links are down in the details of the video. Right now, I have the link for the fan page. Is that the best place to go to, Dana, if people want to know like more about you and connect with you?
I would say yes, it
Okay.
is actually the best place. I do monitor it. I do get alerts that somebody's on there, and it's actually the best place to ask me questions as an author. If we connect on Facebook, then we can do DMs back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. So once again, the links down in the description below if you want to connect with Dana more or learn more about what she's got going on. Awesome. Well, Dana, like once again, thank you so much. I
Welcome.
appreciate you, and I'll let you get going.
All righty. Thank you. And thank you again for having me on.
Of course. All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Excellent. So that was a very great interview. I had a lot of fun going through that podcast. As I've been improving this experience, I've been asking myself, how are ways that I can make it more efficient? How can I make it more fun and engaging for you, the writers? Always feel free to leave me feedback on if there's either like types of questions you want me to ask, or are there any specific types of authors or writers you'd like me to sit and chat with. So we have quite a number of fun guests coming up in the future. I want to say I have about the next, I think like 5 to 6 writers slash authors booked. So we're getting quite a cool variety. I'm trying out a different types of writing experiences to bring you the most value. So now that we're at this part of the podcast, what I'm going to do, let me switch gears. So I'm going to pull up ChatGPT on my end, and we're going to do our writing sprint. All right, and let's see, give me just a second to switch gears on my end, because how can we call ourselves writers if we're not getting some writing? All right, so I got that. Now, as I'm asking myself, I'm like, what type of writing image do we think is going to feel good today? I'm like, what type is going to feel rewarding? All right, let me pull this up. I'm going to share my screen and let's go. All right, perfect. So I'm going to go into image generator on GBT. And all right, so I'm going to ask myself, what would be a good style of image to free write today? I think I'm kind of feeling science fiction. Not only that, it's also Star Wars weekend, right? Yesterday was May the 4th be with you. So I was like, I had to have Yoda, got to represent. So I'm like, let's do a sci-fi themed writing prompt. So let's go. Give me a writing. Give me an image for a writing for a free write exercise. Let's see. Make it space. If I do Star Wars, I know it won't let me do a franchise. So I'll say, give me a. Let's see. Make it a space themed image with a clear character, antagonist, obstacle, and or let's see, and or items. I'll put that can be used as inspiration. All right, so give me an image for a free write exercise. Make it a space-themed image with a clear character. Let's say with a clear character, let's make that a clear protagonist. Let's go protagonist. With a clear protagonist, antagonist, obstacle, obstacles, we'll put obstacles, and or items. So I'm going to put obstacle like that. Obstacles and or items that can be used as inspiration. All right, so let's see what it gives us. We're going to throw this into our image generator. Ooh, all right, drum roll. Drum roll. Let's see what ChatGPT has in store for us. And while we're waiting for ChatGPT, let's say I just wanted to hop into the comments. I just want to give a thank you. Thank you all for being so engaged and being part of the experience. I'm glad that y'all were able to get some value out of it. Tish, thank you so much for being active. Mommy Tully, I appreciate you. John H. Stevenson, the fourth, respect. Thank you for coming on. And let's see. And Marta, thank you so much for joining. We had Dave earlier on and Silent. Thank you all for joining on the interview today and being actively engaged in the comments. Okay, so it looks like, ooh, interesting. This is interesting what we got. Okay, so it looks like, so let me download it. All right, I think we have an interesting space-styled theme. We got some type of an astronaut. Okay, I think this is going to be give us good feel for this exercise. Okay, so that's the image. Now let me download it. I'm going to adjust my screen here. Let's see, I got to get my word out. So let me adjust this, and then I need to pull up my timer, and we'll get started on this writing exercise. Let's see, and we're going to do it as we got a 20-minute writing sprint. Perfect. All right, and I got it all set here. Beautiful. And let's just put at the top, I'll put what the exercise is, writing exercise, free write. We'll do a 20-minute free write using this image as inspiration. Perfect, plain and simple, super easy. And let me just make sure that that's large enough. All right, perfect. And I think I'm all set. Now, of course, the last thing we're going to need, actually, let me throw that in the banner, writing exercise. I'm going to adjust the banner so I can have that at the bottom. There we go. There's our right. Okay, so I'm all ready. Let's throw up the music. All right, so 20 minutes. Let's see what story we come up with. You can do whatever you want, whatever comes to mind. Have fun. All right, I got 20 minutes on the clock. And it's time to write now. All right, all right, all right. And that is the writing sprint. All right. What an interesting little sprint. I think that one was interesting. I was all right with how mine turned out. I was like, I think I got an interesting story. I was like, I'm kind of mixed on if I liked it or not. I tried something with the monster and the image, and I think it was fun. But I'm still thinking on whether or not I liked it. I know the direction I was going with it, and I know I definitely didn't get through it, but it was definitely a fun image. So like I had fun writing it, but I'm not sure if how I feel about the story. So how did your stories turn out? Definitely I hope that you got some good inspiration for our space science fiction themed weekend. That was definitely a great little experience. So as always, I love doing the writing prompts. I love doing the writing exercises. It's kind of a fun way, just to do a really easy writing motivation. All right. And as I go into the next portion, as I think, what do we watch next? So, if you've just checked out the podcast, I actually just launched a brand new video this weekend. Let me pull it up. So, I launched a brand new video. Looks like I got to pull up the picture itself. All right, here we go. So, launched a brand new video. Here's the thumbnail for it. It's workshop on writing a magic system. This is just the thumbnail. It's live on my YouTube channel on Kauffman's Corner. So this is probably first off my longest video, and it's the most in-depth. I created a 10-step technique to help you build a foundation for any type of writing or any type of magic system in writing. It's very in-depth and very thorough. I include some writing exercises, a strategy, a 10-step strategy, and a little writing activity to help get you started. This is perfect for anyone who's just coming up with like a new type of magic for their book, or whether they've already developed one and they kind of want to make sure that it makes sense and that it's believable. So definitely go check it out on my YouTube channel on Kauffman's Corner if you haven't done so already. It is a fun video. All right. And that's what we got there. Definitely make sure if you got value out of today's stream. Let me make sure I got this. Yeah, there you go. If you found any value out of today's stream, make sure to follow and subscribe. I do these, I stream daily. This is a multi-format channel. We do daily streaming. I do writing videos and writing shorts to give you that writing inspiration and motivation to help you with your own stuff, and so you can help you become a better writer and get your story published. We had a really great chat today with Dana Bell. That was like, we got some great conversations on networking with other writers, going to conventions, publishers, editors, the whole shebang. So make sure that if you missed out, to go back and check out the beginning of the stream. Once it ends, I'll add the time codes so you can jump to the part of the podcast that you liked. And that is all that I got for you today, fellow writers. I'm Kauffman, and this has been an absolutely great podcast experience. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. Stay creative, writers. I'll catch you on the morrow.